Well, good evening and welcome to Real Fellas Talk Sports. It's Wednesday, it's 7 o'clock. I'm with my guys, Larry and David. I love Wednesdays at 7. We get a chance to chop up the week in sports. There's a lot. There's a lot going on, and we're going to try to tackle most of it. But before we get started, of course, I want to say hello to my guys. David, good evening. How's the weather out in Indianapolis, Indiana?
We've got a dusting of snow coming down right now. We're getting more snow this season than last year. I mean, and it's a little amount of snow, but I hate looking at snow, period. I just hate it. But as long as it's not 2 and 3 feet, that's fine. I can live with it.
Cool. Mr. Larry Abels, good evening, sir. Mr. Abels, how are you? At least I know we've had rain here in the Washington, D.C. area all day. We don't have that stuff that David has. But Larry, how are you doing and how are you handling the weather?
Weather's a piece of cake. It was actually kind of mild today, other than the wet stuff, but I'm doing fine otherwise. And just like you, I always look forward to this time of the week.
Let's, without any further ado, let's just get into it. And we're going to get started first with college football. I mean, it was a huge weekend last weekend. A lot of good stuff. We had conference championships, and then they settled for the 12-team tournament, which, by the way, I love this new tournament. I really do. I'm looking forward to it. So let's just go ahead and try to chop up last week's games, and maybe if we have time, take a peek at the games that will occur on the weekend of the 20th. So let's start with Boise State and UNLV. I think the country got a chance. It was last Friday. I think the country got a chance to see Ashton Jeanette. I don't know if I said that name right. On David's favorite, the Blue Field. And Boise handled them 21-7. And as a result, won that conference championship and will get a bye. David, what do you think of old Boise State? And what do you think of that game? And what are their prospects going forward?
In a way, I'm going to jump ahead. I think Boise can win it all.
Wow.
First of all, we should not look at Boise as some upstart. They have been a major program in a small conference for almost 20 years. They know how to win, no matter who the coach is. So I see them doing well. UNLV, by the way, UNLV's coach, former coach now, is going to be coaching at Purdue. UNLV has a good program as well. Mountain West is a strong conference. It may not have all the money of the Big Ten or the SEC, but it's not a joke conference. They play major league football. I'm Boise State all the way. If it's not Indiana, I'm Boise State.
Yeah, that's interesting. They only loss they had this season was by 3 points to Oregon, and I think that was the first game of the season. I'm going to get back to you to kind of get your thoughts on Ashton. Larry, what do you think of Boise and that game and so forth? What's your thoughts?
They've been a pretty consistent team all year, so I'm really kind of happy for them. And I'm not sure how strong the conference is, but they seem to be pretty good. So I'm guessing just like other conferences, they probably have a couple of other decent teams there. But they've been pretty consistent all year. They beat everyone in their conference. And like you said, when they played Oregon, they played them very close.
They did. We'll get back to Ashton later after we review all the games, because I want to talk to you guys about him as it relates to the Heisman, which is also going to happen. I think the voting is done. I think they're going to make that. I think that decision happens this weekend, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's go to the next game, which is Oregon and Penn State. Good old big game winning Penn State. Oregon won 45-37 in Indianapolis. David, they do know how to host a big event, don't they, David?
Well, they have the Big Ten championship every year in Indianapolis, as it should be. I've got to promote my town.
Right.
Penn State, I just think there's something fundamentally wrong. Yes, they played Oregon well,
They did.
but they come up short. I think there's something fundamentally wrong in James Franklin's approach to big games. And, my Penn State people jumped on my case the other day because I was hard on James Franklin, but I'm sorry. When you're 1-13 in big games, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Penn State deserves better. Oregon is a major program, but I'm not sure they're going to win it all either. They won the Big Ten. They could beat Penn State. That's kind of a foregone conclusion to beat Penn State in a big game. Beyond that, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Hey, Larry, what do you think? But before you mention that, look, usually Penn State doesn't score enough points. And this weekend, they scored 37 points, but they gave up 45. And one other quick comment, that Aaron, I will say about Oregon, they're fast. Larry, what'd you think of that game and the results in Oregon?
Well, Oregon, I guess, has really showed that they're really the king of the Big Ten. They've taken on everybody in that conference, undefeated season this year. The ranked teams they've played, they've beaten them. So I have a lot of faith in Oregon. Oregon is legit. I'm not, Penn State doesn't seem to be able to get over the hump. And before I go any further, let me give a shout out to Phyllis and Greg Fenner. Thank both of you for joining in and commenting.
Hey, Phyllis and Greg, I have to tell you tonight real quick, I can't read the comments, so you guys will have to shout out the folks who come up with comments and so forth because I cannot see them.
But the thing about Penn State, they'll actually get a chance to prove whether or not they're a decent team. They need to win at least one game in these playoffs, or I think the real questions will start to being asked about their coach. Even more questions, I should say, are going to be asked about their coach's ability.
Right, and winning the big game. And how about that? And by the way, they're ranked number 3 in the country, and we still say, no, that's not quite good enough. That's crazy, right? But that's the Penn State thing, right? And Ryan Day from Ohio State, we're going to talk about them later, but he's kind of in the same boat. Can't seem to win the big game as well. The next game is Georgia versus Texas. I think Texas is 11-0 this year and 0-2 against Georgia. They can't beat Georgia. Georgia won 22-19. David, what's your thoughts about that? How good is Texas? What you think of that game and so forth?
Texas is a good team. Georgia is better. Georgia is championship tested. They have a championship coach and will be hard to beat. I see Georgia going deep in the national championship race. That said, there's something about Texas. I just don't believe in them. The quarterback, they should be starting Archer Manning instead of, but Archer Manning has his time next season.
Yours. Yeah.
Georgia did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah,
and so I don't see it as an upset. I just didn't see it as an upset. No.
Yeah, I don't think this team is as strong as some previous Georgia teams. However, they know how to play, and they have played in big games. And I thought that really helped them, kind of like Kansas City in pro football. But, Larry, what'd you think of that game?
Georgia seems to have Texas's number.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we have to say. Like David, I think they're a very good team. I'm not sure how far they'll go. They certainly seem capable of beating anybody out there, but they do have a couple of losses this year. So I'm not sure, but I think they are a very good team.
No, I agree with that.
What's up, Kung Fu?
Hey, what's up, Kung Fu?
Welcome.
Thanks for hanging out. All right, let's look at the next game. It's interesting because I think this was a little bit of an upset. Number 17, Clemson, knocked off number 8, SMU. Now, I don't think SMU had been tested this year, but they were still having, they were undefeated in the ACC. And then Clemson beat them 34-31, which was, again, a great game, especially the second half. Any thoughts about that game? And I'll do it the reverse. I'll start with you, Larry. Any thoughts about that game?
Well, I'm starting to really think that these I know the SEC has made a lot of noise about how weak the other conferences are, but I think what's happening in all the conferences, I think the level of talent has kind of leveled off a little bit. Yep. And I think anybody can lose in their conference, especially if they have to play, teams that they're familiar with. Now, a lot of teams weren't familiar with SMU and vice versa. They weren't familiar with anyone. But I think in all of these conferences, other than Oregon, seems like everybody's taking a bite. Yeah. I thought it was a great game. They showed me a lot of heart coming back. They could have rolled over because they were down by like 14 or something. And they hung in there and came back.
Yeah, only lost by 3. What a great
I'm glad they got in.
Yeah, I think that second half, and we'll talk about that in a second. I think that second half might have got them in, but we'll talk about that in a second. David, any thoughts about that Clemson SMU game?
The surprise is Clemson still being around. I mean, we basically wrote off Clemson for dead after game 1 of the season. But SMU is a good program. At least it is now. They've got plenty of money. They didn't need the ACC money. And they're going to be a hard out.
Yeah.
In the playoffs. That said, Clemson has a coach who is championship tested.
Yeah.
SMU, and I think the reason SMU struggled so hard in the first half is because they hadn't been there before.
First time, right?
And not a lot's expected. They're considered, an up and comer as opposed to a successful team so far. But I'm glad SMU's in the playoffs.
I am too. I quite frankly am too. And again, I will make a comment about the fact that they were down big time at the half, and they came back, fought like the Dickens, lost by 3. And I do believe that got them into the final 12 over a 3-loss Alabama. But we'll, when we get to the part about this whole program, I want to get y'all's thoughts about the 12 teams and so forth. I will also make another comment. I'll make also another comment about Dabo. He's the one coach that doesn't use the portal system. He's against it. And yet here he is. So shout out to Dabo for doing it his way.
Greg Fenner, thank you.
Greg said he was on the Texas bandwagon early, but he's going to use his DC Transit transfer and get on the Oregon bus now.
Very clever, Gregory.
He's going way back with DC Transit. He must be from DC.
That's right. He definitely
Iron Horse. The Iron Horse.
DC Transit, the green and light green and dark green bus. All right, the final game of the weekend was it was for the Big 12, and it was Arizona State versus Iowa State. And quite frankly, I don't know about you two, but I didn't know much about either of those two teams. However, I know a little bit about Arizona State now and that little running back. So, David, any thoughts about that game? Arizona State won that.
Arizona State has been tough all year. They're playing in a different conference. They're not in the Pac-12 anymore. The Pac-12 doesn't exist. Iowa State, good program. Don't know much about them. Didn't know much about Arizona State. But there's a part of me that's like sad because Herm Edwards couldn't get Arizona State to that level.
No.
And, Herm Edwards, we now see as a commentator on ESPN again. Right. It's a shame he couldn't have done it. He couldn't have been the head coach of this particular Arizona State team.
Speaking of which, before we go get your thoughts, Larry, speaking of which, you mentioned something good, a pro coach going to Arizona State, not being able to get them over the hump. We had an announcement before we came on the show. Apparently, Mr. William Belichick is going to take over at the University of North Carolina. David, you have any initial reaction to that news? Are you surprised?
Well, until all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, I don't know that it's going to happen. I think Bill Belichick wants everything set up. He's 72 years old. He's never coached in college as a head coach. It's going to be a challenge for him. And in this new environment with the NIL transfer portal, I don't know how he handles that. North Carolina is a middle-of-the-pack football program. They are a basketball school that is a 500 football program historically. Belichick is going to have a challenge.
Yeah. I thought I heard it was official. right before we came on the show. So maybe you know something different.
Well, I don't know anything different.
Okay.
I don't know. I just
Larry,
think that
Larry,
there's going to be some holes there.
Larry, have you heard if it's official or not?
Yeah, look, what I saw was they were working out the final details. It was almost, it appeared to be imminent that he's taking a job.
Right.
That's the way I read it.
Until he's at the podium with UNC emblazoned behind him, I won't believe it.
Hey, is anybody out there in our audience? Do they know if this thing is official or not? Because again, right before I came on, I thought I saw a comment or a thing on ESPN that said it was official. But if our audience has any
I saw it right before we came on, about 15 minutes, and they said it was finalizing the deal.
Right.
That's the way
But finalizing means nothing.
Okay.
Well, I think it could mean a lot.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
So, but I want to comment on the game.
That's why I was going. I wasn't not going to ignore you on that. I just he mentioned the Herb Edwards thing, which made me think about the Bill Belichick thing. So, what was your thoughts on the Iowa State game? By the way, Iowa State, that whole program, their basketball team's pretty good too. So they're doing something out there. And where's that? Ames, Iowa. What did you think of that game, Larry? And had you ever heard of this little running back Scatterboo?
No, I haven't heard of him. And you know what happened? Arizona State was only won 3 or 4 games last year. Iowa State was a big favorite and a scoring machine. But when they came out in the second half, they turned the ball over 3 straight times, and it led to 21 straight points by Arizona State. So they looked great. Scatterboo looked like he should have been going to New York this weekend. He was posing in the end zone after he scored touchdowns. They look to be playing very well right now. Again, you know, we don't know what they'll do against different competition, but they look like they're playing well at the moment.
No, I agree.
And I guess they'll get a bye, so they'll be in it for another week.
A weekend, right. And you're right. I think that game is probably the game the three of us probably knew as little about as the other ones. But, yeah, we found out about this guy Scatterboo I knew nothing about. So good for them. Now, you mentioned, and before we get to the rest of the tournament, you mentioned Scatterboo thinks he should be in New York. When you mentioned that, that's the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So, guys, I think we have the 4 finalists. I think we have Ashton from Boise. We have Cam Ward from Miami. We have Travis Hunter from Colorado.
Yeah.
And we have
Gabriel or something like that.
Oh, yeah, Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, the quarterback from Oregon. With that said, what's your thoughts on that? And who do you guys, and I'll start with you, Larry, who do you think will win the Heisman Trophy?
Well, I think
wait. Who do you think is going to win the Heisman Trophy? And who do you think should have won the Heisman Trophy?
Oh, I think it's going to be either Hunter or the running back from Boise. But Hunter has gotten most of the publicity, and you know these things kind of work that way. But I gotta, think what's the guy Ashton Henty or whatever.
Yes,
he's got to get some consideration if he breaks the all-time rushing record. But either one of them will be fine in my book. I think either one of them are deserving.
David, what's your thoughts? Hey, David, did you think that Shador should have been there instead of Cam Ward from Miami?
No, they're not going to put 2 players from the same team in New York. It's just not going to happen.
But do you think
if he was on another team,
right,
he would have been in the Final Four.
Right.
It's Travis Hunter in a blowout. It's not even going to be close. Should it be close? Any other? Well, no.
Really?
This is the first time since the 50s and the 40s that we've had players playing on both sides of the ball, playing successfully on both sides of the ball. We went to a platoon system 40, 50 years ago, and guys only played offense or they only played defense. Travis Hunter is playing 90% of the entire game and doing it well on both sides of the ball. He has to win the Heisman Trophy. If he doesn't blow the thing out, it's a damn shame. And that doesn't take anything away from Ashton Genty, because any other year if there was no Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty would be the winner of the Heisman Trophy. It's just unfortunate that he is just in a year where there's a Travis Hunter.
Larry, you have any rebuttal to that or any thoughts to his point there?
Well, like I said, I would be all right with Hunter winning it. I don't necessarily. I understand his logic. I don't necessarily agree with it. Right. I think if Jeanty is more dominant than he is, I think he's probably a more dominant offensive player. So if we're just going to look at that, who's the most dominant player, I think he could get some votes. But both of them are dominant. So I don't think it should be a blowout. I think it should be close.
It's going to be a blowout.
But should it be? That's the question.
Yes.
I don't think it necessarily will.
Yeah. When I'm next in DC, it's dinner on you.
Well, I'm not saying it won't be. I'm saying should it be? Here's why, David, in my opinion. I mean, Travis only played 9 games of the 12 or of the and so he missed a couple of games. And Jeanty, Barry Sanders has his record since 1988, and he's getting ready to break that record. And that record was unbelievable in terms of yardage and way over 2,000 yards, almost 2,500 yards. And he's been solid as can be. Oregon's the #1 team in the country. He had 200 yards against them too. If this was USC back in our day and his name was O.J. Simpson.
Well, you're right. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you. I just think this is a unique year. Any other year, hear me clearly, any other year, Ashton Jeanty would win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
So this is not a normal year. No full-time defensive player plus full-time offensive player has been presented in modern college football. And that we have to just look at it like that. And that just makes this year a unique year.
I like them both. I'm not going to lie. I like them both. I just think that Ashton doesn't have the marketing machine that Travis has. And I think what Ashton's done is pretty remarkable. So I don't want that to get lost in all of
I think it depends on if people value, and what David said certainly makes some sense.
No doubt.
But I don't think everybody necessarily would value playing both ways better than being a dominant player at his position. Some
and
might
being
say
in the championship and being in the tournament.
Yeah, well,
he led Boise State to a bye. Come on.
Well, first of all, let's not act like just the way you said he led Boise State. Boise State is one of the top 20 programs every single freaking year, and have been, but they get overlooked because they're in the Mountain West and because they play on a blue damn field. That Boise State is a real program, and they're better than freaking Purdue.
Right. All right. We spent a lot of time on that. You go through some good thoughts. You guys had good, discussions and debates on that. So let me ask you this question, and I do, but how do you guys like this 12-team tournament? I think it's kind of cool. What do you think, David? And did they get it right? Oh,
yeah, they got it right. SMU over Alabama, you damn straight. Alabama lost. They scored 3 points against Oklahoma. That eliminated them. Now I will say this, if Nick Saban was still the head coach, they would get a couple of more votes in that negotiating room and probably would be in. But Nick Saban ain't the coach anymore. And that matters.
Right.
That matters. But they got it right, but they're going to go to 16.
We're going to get to that in a second. Larry, what do you think of the 12-team tournament? And do you think they got it right?
Yeah, I think they got it right. 12 teams is fine. The only thing I would probably change out of this year, is the seeding. I would take the top 4 seeds would be the highest ranked teams. Some of the teams like ranked number 15 or 16 has a bye this week, so that seems a little off to me.
Like Arizona State.
Yeah, I don't mind them getting a spot in there, but getting a bye is a whole different ballgame.
Right. Well, can I say this?
Yes.
Strength of schedule is it's so biased. It's biased for big conferences. It's biased for the Big Ten. It's biased for the SEC. And who's to say that the Mountain West, Boise is the 81st ranked strength of schedule? I don't buy that. They may, so in other words, you've already predetermined that the Mountain West isn't that good. Wrong. Every year is every year, and it should be weighed individually, and they don't do that.
All right.
The SEC
So are you saying this in response to my comment about the buys?
No, not.
Okay,
I'm not going to get into the buys. No.
Okay.
No.
The general conversation about strength of schedule. So let me ask you this, David. If I made you, or someone made you, the czar of college football, and you could implement a change next year, I know that's a big question and a big, I'll just let it sit there. What change would you make? What would you like to see changed?
NIL. There's got to be a way to make NIL, codify it so that players don't just jump from here to there, and the transfer portal. There's got to be some way to standardize the way this works, because it's the wild, wild west, and the contracts, whatever the NIL contracts are, should be public. It should be standardized. It doesn't matter how much a player makes, but we should know what they make. Initially, when they talked about the NIL, and you asked me what would I change, this is fundamentally changing. There are 1,000 players in the transfer portal.
Yeah, the entire
1,000.
That's
absurd. That's absurd. You can't have players. So why don't we just say that college football is the minor league of the NFL and be done with it? Because these guys are not going to class. It's absurd. It's ridiculous.
Larry, if I made you the commissioner, or someone made you the commissioner or the overseer of college football, what change would you like to see in college football?
Well, I already just mentioned one about the tournament. I've always been a proponent of the schools paying people directly, okay? Because that still doesn't happen. And the schools are raking in big money, paying the football coaches the highest paid state employee, which is kind of ridiculous.
Can I say this? And I don't mean to interrupt you, Larry. But schools are technically paying players directly, because the NIL
no, they're not.
Program. Well, wait a minute. Just hear me out.
Okay.
It may not look like it, but the NIL organizations for each school are directly connected to the school.
They're connected to the schools, but it's not costing the schools a penny. Those are outside sources paying, and the schools are raking in multi-millions of dollars.
I don't disagree with you
from
there.
TV contracts, and they're not giving players anything out of that. Eventually
that will change,
and that's what needs to change right there.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
So you two,
man, your thoughts are always welcome.
So you two would like to see some adjustments to the NIL, either school paying or just a new way to kind of go about how you would compensate the athlete.
I don't really. NIL is really a joke. It's really supposed to be paid for using their name, image, and likeness, and they're just paying them money under the table. So maybe they should just pay them when they use their images, or like in video games, or sell their jerseys and stuff like that. Maybe they should just pay them that way, as opposed to when they're using NIL, because that opened up the door that really gave them the right to go out and do advertising. But very few of them are doing advertising. They're just getting money under the table. So maybe they could tighten that up. I don't have as much problem with players switching schools, especially since coaches can leave at any time, and that puts them in jeopardy. But I agree with David that something needs to be done, because it seems to be out of control now.
It's completely unregulated. Because when they started the concept of NIL, it was supposed to be that the schools would be essentially hands off. If you remember 3-4 years ago when this began, it would be schools hands off. Now it's schools directly involved.
Oh yeah, they have the collectors right at their school. It's their boosters, really.
It was not designed
Yeah.
when they started this. That was not the purpose of NIL because they
Oh.
wanted to keep it separate.
Yeah,
And
what
now
it's
it's
really,
become
David,
convoluted.
what it really was it gives the players a right. If they're going to use my image in video games, my name and image in video games, I should get a cut. If they're going to use me on commercials that advertise for the broadcast, I should get a cut.
Right.
That's what it should be. And they weren't supposed to wear their school uniforms in those states.
Correct.
That's totally out of the. Nobody even cares. They don't even do commercials.
That's why I'm saying it's totally unregulated. And the NCAA or whatever regulation body needs to step in and organize this thing. Players, the kid from BYU in basketball. I know we're talking football. $7 million. Why is he staying in Utah? Because BYU found $7 million. Now, are those boosters? Yeah, but the school organizes what do we call it? A collective.
Yeah.
Right.
The school creates the collective. Indiana University, where you're connected, Chuck,
Yes,
has
we
a
have a
collective. Even my school, Ball State, has a damn collective. It wasn't supposed to be that way.
Well, I think next year they're supposed to. I think I saw something. Now I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far because it's a complicated subject. But I heard that next year the schools are going to be paying them directly or something. Didn't we hear that somewhere?
I think you may be right about that.
Right. And so
there
I don't know how
court
that's
cases. There was some court cases that said that started leading them in that direction because they're deemed employees of the school.
Right.
And like David said, if they're only going there 1 year leaving, they're not really students there.
Right. Well, it's professional now. It's professional now. It's
Right.
just like when the Olympics, remember years ago when we started bringing our pros to the Olympics and we called it amateur sports. Well, it wasn't amateur after that, right? It just wasn't amateur. And it's not amateur now.
It never truly was.
Well, right. I mean, so there you go. By the way, David, the guy you're talking about that's going to BYU, he's getting that $7 million, if I read this correctly, from the owner of the Utah Jazz. Somehow there's a connection between billionaire owner of the Jazz.
He's in the collective.
That money to pay this guy.
He's in the collective.
The collective. They want to tout the Mormon values of BYU. And $7 million is a drop in the bucket to promote the greatness of Mormonism. There you go.
Look, we got Mark Cuban, so I'm not mad at the collective. We got Mark Cuban, and so as a result,
well, you better tell Mark Cuban to ante up even more.
Before we go further, we need to give a shout out to Andrew Stevens too. I didn't shout him out when we posted his thing. He says, "Chuck, you're worked up tonight."
What's up, Andrew? What did he say, Larry? Do you remember?
He says, "You're worked up tonight."
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Probably because I can't see nobody. Anyway. All right. Well, look, anything else before on college? We spent a lot of time on college football, which I think was the right thing to do given where we are. Before we go, who's going to win the national championship? David.
Boise State.
Larry.
Oregon.
All right. Okay. Because
I want it to be IU.
Yes.
But I think Boise State has a legitimate shot to win the national championship.
Cool. All right. We spent a lot of time on that. Sorry about that. Let's jump into NFL, and we've got 3 games I want to touch on. We'll try to move pretty quickly. The first one is the Kansas City Chiefs. Man, are they lucky, good, all of the above, and the LA Chargers. They Kansas City won 19-7. The field goal hit the goalpost, doink, and fell in. They won 19-17. David, are the Chargers good? Are they lucky? Are they the refs help? What is the deal with Kansas City, David?
Kansas City is very lucky this year. They're not going to win the Super Bowl unless there's 1 minute left or 12 seconds left. And Patrick Mahomes has the ball, and then they'll win. No, I don't see them winning the Super Bowl. But Kansas City's lucky this year. I mean, but to be lucky and to be 10-1, 11-1, that's pretty damn good.
It's pretty damn good. I agree with you. Larry, what do you think of Kansas City in that game? And I mean, are they good? I mean, of course their record says they're good, but what's up with that?
And I will give a shout out to my niece Lauren. She says the Chiefs are talented and lucky, and I think she's she's
right.
on target. And sometimes, the old saying, it's better to be lucky than good. Oh my goodness, they won just about every close game. Only team we lost against was Buffalo. So as much as when I look at them, looking at with the eye test, they don't seem to be that good, but their record says that they're good.
Right. Interesting. A real quick comment. Eric Bieniemy was one of their. Actually, his title was offensive coordinator when he was there and he won a couple Super Bowls. But he has really struggled since he's left there. He came to the Commanders, didn't work out, got fired. Went to UCLA to become their offensive coordinator. Guess what? They just fired him after the first year. Do we have any thoughts about Eric Bieniemy? Do we want to say anything about him real quick?
I'd love to say something about him.
Okay.
Eric Bieniemy, I won't go there because Larry will get on my case.
Okay.
He does not look the part of a head coach.
But a coordinator.
All the talk about Eric Bieniemy was about being a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
He's been a coordinator. He's been a successful coordinator technically.
Right.
But he doesn't look the part. And part of it is, particularly for an African-American male, you got to look the part.
Right.
And I shouldn't bring race into it, but but this is America.
Right. How about you, Larry? Any thoughts? Maybe you don't have any, but any thoughts about Eric Bieniemy?
Yeah, David shouldn't bring race in there because the bottom line is he just hasn't been successful since he left Kansas City. So it doesn't matter how he looks. When you can't produce, you can't produce. A lot of people look successful when they have great talent, and he had great talent in Kansas City. Came here, didn't have such great talent, couldn't perform miracles. UCLA was pretty much the same way.
Well, so let me just say this about that. My point is, if he looked the part, he would have gotten more credit for what happened in Kansas City. He looked disheveled, unorganized, and the credit always went to Andy Reid. And that's unfortunate. Whereas other offensive coordinators, up-and-coming offensive coordinators, do tend to get the credit for the offensive success. He never did. He never really did.
Yeah, I think he got it in Kansas City, but once he came to Washington,
not really. The reality
that
is
was a whole controversy about him not getting a head coaching job because he's such a great coordinator. And I always like to point that Norv Turner was a great offensive coordinator when he was with the Cowboys, when he had Michael Irvin and Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith. Then he came to Washington as a head coach.
But Norv Turner got credit for being an outstanding offensive coordinator. Eric Bieniemy never did.
They say he wasn't even calling the plays.
The plays were called by Andy Reid. The strategy was Andy Reid's. The TV cameras were on Andy Reid. Period. That matters. Yeah. That matters.
Well, we saw what happened when he got to call the plays, right?
Well,
when who got to call the plays?
The enemy got to call.
Oh, I know. Here in Washington, it was a joke. Right.
But it was Washington.
Right. Of course.
Well, David, I just think had he had any success here, he might have got a shot at being a head coach.
Right. But it wasn't set up. It wasn't set up, Larry. That whole thing was a disaster.
I agree. No quarterback.
Right.
Yeah, no quarterback, no offense.
All them people got fired. So, okay, next game is Rams-Buffalo. Rams, what a game, by the way. Rams won 44-42. It was in L.A. Mr. Allen had 6 touchdowns, 3 running, 3 passing. Thoughts about that game? And I guess we have to put Mr. Allen at the top of the MVP race right now, don't we, David?
Josh Allen, provided he doesn't get hurt, will win the MVP this year. I think it's been building for time, but 6 touchdowns is 6 touchdowns. 3 on the ground, 3 in the air.
Come on.
Even though Saquon Barkley should still be there, but we know the MVP is becoming a quarterback award, so it's going to lean toward Josh Allen at this point. Joe Burrow, if Cincinnati was any good this year, would give him heavy competition, and that's all I'll say about that.
Okay, Larry, any thoughts about the Rams-Buffalo game?
Oh, I thought it was definitely entertaining. But like they say in court sometimes, the defense rests. Where was the defense for both of those teams? Non-existent. But for offensive display, both teams played well, kept you in your seats. I could take those games anytime.
Right. It just goes to show you, and I think this is the case. I really do, despite the injuries and problems they've had in LA, the Rams, that head coach knows what he's doing. He does. And when they're fully healthy, and they were in that game with Akua and with Kupp and so forth, man, Stafford, what a display both teams put on. So there you go.
Hey, Chuck, Buffalo and Detroit play this week.
Another great game coming up. They said Buffalo's scheduled starting last week over the next 3 weeks. It's supposed to be pretty. I think they play Baltimore after that.
I think you're right.
Yeah, so they have a tough schedule coming up. Okay, the next game is the Lions and the Green Bay Packers, or what I would call sick bay, because the poor Lions are losing players like crazy, and yet they still won 34-31. David, any thoughts about the Lion-Green Bay game? I think that was last Thursday. But
Lions and Green Bay, the Green Bay plays the Lions very well.
They do.
All the time. The NFC North is a tough division. The Lions have a lot of injuries,
they do.
and that matters in key positions. But there's something about them.
Yeah,
something about them. They don't want to play Green Bay in the playoffs, though. I will tell you that. That will be a tough game.
Yeah, unfortunately,
because Green Bay knows them very well.
Unfortunately, the margin of error is really thin, and when you start losing so many people, man, it's tough. And yet they still win. So, Larry, any thoughts of that game?
Yeah, I pretty much want to second David's comments. Green Bay is very familiar with them, and your comments too, Chuck. They've had a lot of injuries, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. It's not even spread out, but they seem to have such a deep team, and that deepness is actually being tested. And I think in the playoffs, that'll be a very interesting game if those two have to play.
100%. And by the way, I think they had some type of, kicker who was there for a couple of weeks or something, walked off his sofa or something, and he kicked a 56-yard field goal to win it. So they are, too, figuring out ways to win football games. Just want to say that about Detroit. Detroit's a pretty good team and have been all year. So give me, gentlemen, your top 5 in terms of the National Football League. I'll start with you, David.
Detroit number 1, Buffalo number 2, and we'll figure that out. That'll probably switch next week, or could switch next week. Philadelphia, which apparently is having some internal problems again. Number 3, Pittsburgh number 4, Kansas City number 5. And I hesitated to put Kansas City in, but they just keep winning anyway, despite themselves.
Right. Larry?
No particular order, but I get the same 5 teams as the best.
Yeah. I have 4 of them. I'm sorry. I still think Baltimore's talented. We'll see how that all plays out. We'll see. How about MVP?
You probably think Alabama should have made the playoffs too, right?
No, I don't. No, hell no. I don't. But I do believe
when you pick Baltimore,
I think they're talented, and they figure out ways to lose. And this is a marathon. This ain't a sprint. We'll see at the end.
I'm just messing with you.
Right. How about MVPs, Larry?
Well, this is a week-to-week thing, so this week I'll go with Josh Allen, but it can change in a couple of weeks. But right now, I have to say Josh Allen.
Yeah. How about? I think you shared your thoughts, David.
Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen's going to win. If he doesn't get injured, he's going to win the award. And I think it's kind of due time. He's indestructible. I mean, he just reminds me. He reminds me of a quarterback who didn't run. Remember Roman Gabriel?
Oh, Roman Gabriel.
When we were young,
from the Rams.
They would try to tackle him, and he would just shake them off. All of that. That's what I see of Josh Allen.
Big
Nothing
Ben.
hurts him.
Yeah,
Nothing hurts him.
and he's cut down on the turnovers too.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of Steve Young.
Oh yeah, that's another tough one. He reminds me a little bit of the destructible part is Big Ben Roethlisberger. He was so big and strong.
They
bounced off of him too.
Yes.
So, is there anything before? And by the way, I get you since you brought it up, David. How about that Philadelphia situation between AJ Brown and Hurts? Do you think that's? Do you think that's just one of those things that they can just get past that, or do you think there's really a problem there?
Well, let me just say this: if this was going on in Pittsburgh, it wouldn't be happening. Or if there was a rift.
Hold on a minute. They had Antonio Brown there.
Well, Antonio Brown left, didn't he?
After 10 years.
Well, when he started going nuts, he was out.
Right.
Tomlin said, "Get the F out of here."
Right.
I think it speaks poorly of the organization of Philadelphia in controlling the players. They've won 9 in a row, and you're arguing.
They're playing well.
You gotta shut up. Just shut up.
Well,
oh my God.
Mr. Abels, I know Mr. Abels keeps an eye, although he might deny it, on Philadelphia and Philadelphia sports. What do you think about that, Larry? About the looks like infighting in Philadelphia.
I don't keep any more eye on them than anybody else.
Wink.
I don't know why you think that. But
because you always talk about the 76ers all the time.
Well, I watch good teams. I like Embiid there. The thing about I just looked at it as a player that was frustrated after the game because he didn't get many targets. When you look at his play, he's blocking downfield. He's doing his job, but they were playing a team that he probably thought they could have beaten worse. And Philadelphia's a running team, and they're sticking with running. He probably thought they could have thrown on him a little bit more. He got 4 targets, and maybe he has a point there. I just thought he was frustrated, and he just said we need to improve in the passing game.
Yeah,
when the other guy came on the radio and commented, I think he kind of made things worse, but he probably should have just let it go with that.
Right. I agree. And by the way, they're like you said, they were winning. They're starting to win, really, and they've put together consecutive games of winning because they've kind of switched to featuring Saquon, right? So you might not going to throw the ball as much either.
Well, but they had a tough game against Carolina last week, and I think that might have got to him. He probably thought he could have done more. Deebo Samuels said the same thing after he said he didn't get enough touches. He's not getting enough touches.
Wide receivers have always been divas because that other guy, CD Lamb, he's like that too. Earlier in the year, he was having some drama with his quarterback. So, wide receivers are always divas. Bless their hearts.
And maybe they should have targeted him more than 4 times.
All right. All right. Well, let's switch to the National Basketball Association. And I'll just start general. Let's start up top. Just because it's been it's probably a quarter of the season's probably over. We're getting close to this cup tournament. Just give me an observation, Larry, and then we're going to get into some specifics, but give me an observation so far of the NBA. Any thoughts?
Very competitive. Some of the teams that have traded players, it seems like the players are starting to fit in a little better. Karl Anthony Towns has played well. The last couple of weeks, he's played very well.
Yeah.
I think Milwaukee, after starting off horrifically, they had a string at one time where they won 9 out of 10 games, playing well. But it's taking shape. The teams in the West that are looking good is Oklahoma City. They're really looking good.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't come out of the West this year. Boston, I still think, is the team to beat in the East side.
Right.
Boston and Oklahoma City, both teams are deep. I would love to see that in the finals.
David, any thoughts so far? Any general observations from 10,000 feet?
Zion Williamson is hurt again. and he'll never.
So predictable. You are so.
Why is he hurt, David?
He's so predictable.
Does he look the part?
David, is Embiid hurt too? Is Embiid hurt too, David?
No, but he's not as mad as Embiid. He's more
David, is Joker the best player on the planet? I can almost anticipate.
He's more angry at Zion than he is Embiid.
Giannis is the number one player this season,
You guys shut
followed
me
by
up.
Joker.
Yeah, you guys
But-
shut me up. I looked at that half-hour production meeting Monday, and Larry, you were 100% right. Kudos to you. You called it, and you were right. I said I was surprised.
All I know is
I've been looking at them a lot more than Philly this year.
Yeah.
Because he's been playing.
Zion Williamson. Oh my God, he's played half the games that he's supposed to have played in 5 seasons. He's stealing money.
Still
Stop
young.
eating.
He's still
And
young.
David, how about this? He and Kawhi Leonard are up. Their contracts are up this year. Do you think they're going to get paid? I guarantee you, both of them get paid.
If Kawhi Leonard gets a new contract, it'll be a disgrace.
David, the Philadelphia 76ers gave Embiid $64 million a year this summer.
And he's been hurt most of the time, too.
And he's always hurt, and they still paid him.
And I don't get it either.
Right.
Embiid is always out of shape. He got in better shape this year and still didn't play. Zion Williamson got in shape.
Hey, Chuck, hold on for a second. Sharice is chiming in, my other niece.
Okay.
She said, isn't Zion hurt like Anthony Davis is always hurt?
No. I was getting ready
Hey,
to say,
Sharice, thanks for chiming in.
I was getting ready to say to David, hold on, David. I have a call from Anthony Davis. He said, whew, I'm glad you're not on me anymore.
And Lawrence says,
Anthony
"I love
Davis
when
is
David talks
actually
about
playing. He's actually playing. And guess what? He's in shape.
How about this Gold Cup thing? Are you guys monitoring that? Do you know anything about it? Have any thoughts about it? Do you like it?
You talking about the Emirates Cup?
The Emirates Cup. What did I call it? The Gold Cup? The Emirates Cup.
I think it's interesting, and it gives some life to the NBA. It doesn't hurt anything. It's not outside of the regular season, except one game, the championship game is outside of the regular season. That's it.
And the players are taking it serious.
Mm-hmm.
The players are taking it serious.
Yeah, they put some more money in their pocket. That's why it's the serious stuff. It's the time of year where it's hard to compete with college football, pro football, college basketball, etc. So this tournament, I think, does help.
And also Emirates being the sponsor, that's a world organization.
Right.
And the NBA behind soccer or football is the number 2 sport in the world.
Yeah.
So it's meaningful. Any player jump out at you so far, Larry? Any that jumped off that you went, wow, I'm surprised, I didn't see this coming, or I'm really impressed with this person and so forth?
You would ask that. And I can't remember the guy's name. I've been watching Atlanta Hawks.
Trae Young.
He's not. I think he's like a third-year player, but all of a sudden this year, it looks like he's a forward, and he goes down and dunks. He plays great defense. I wish I could think of his name.
Is this the guy from UVA?
What's his name?
Oh,
medium brown skin guy.
Yes, it's like a 4'6", 7', 6'8".
Yes.
Yeah.
He's about in his third year.
Trey.
That sounds like it.
Well,
Okay.
first of all,
He's
it's
playing
not
very well. I
1958.
didn't know where he came from.
First of all, it's not 1958. That's the last time the Hawks won anything. So I'll just leave it right there.
Hey, David, I don't know if it was 58, but later on, a couple of years later, who was the center on that team? Speaking of Indiana University, you remember?
Walter Bellamy, who was the first draft pick of the NBA in 1960.
Yep, the Big Bell.
Bells.
Anything
So
else?
you thought I wouldn't know that, huh?
No, I didn't. Actually, I thought you would. That's why I said David, right? Because
Walter
I know
Bellamy.
about some of the historical stuff, right? And the Indiana stuff. Anything else about the NBA before we start to wrap this thing up?
No.
Okay. Anything else? I want to just briefly get your reaction to a gentleman named Juan Soto. So Mr. Soto signed, I think it's like $765 million with the New York Mets, 15-year deal, average about $51 million a year. goes across town. This is fourth team. David, any thoughts, reaction to that, and so forth? And I'll shut up because, before you get on me about the money, I just want to get your reaction.
It's actually a contract that benefits the New York Mets. Over a 15-year period, $51 million, even though it's an astronomical amount of money for a normal person. Juan Soto is not normal, but 15 years from now, 10 years from now, that's going to be a bargain. And it may not sound like a bargain, but it is a bargain. So really the Mets have done themselves a service. They got this guy locked in at $51 million a year. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Assuming he can play.
Well, I mean, he's 26 years old. Baseball players play till they're about 40, 41. Yeah, he'll live out the contract. Well, Barry Bonds did.
Hello.
Yeah, we could pick out just like LeBron James is doing in basketball,
right?
But he's kind of an exception to the rule.
Right. But no, I hear you though, David. I hear you. If it could be a bargain, but he has a 5-year out in that contract, so it'll be interesting to see.
And if I was him, I'd take it. Exactly. Because in 5 years, the top baseball player, like the top football player, the top basketball player, will be making $75 million a year.
Good Lord. Larry, any thoughts about that contract? And I'll tell you something, Larry. I'd love to get your reaction to this. They said them and the Yankees were only $5 million apart. I mean, what is that about?
$5 million is $5 million.
Really?
You say only $5 million?
inside of a $765 million contract?
I'll still say $5 million is a lot of money. Happy for Juan Soto. I looked at the contract. It's front end loaded, so he's going to make about $60 million for the first 5 years till his opt out. He can choose to opt out, and then the Mets can choose to override his opt out, but they'll end up having to pay him $4 more million a year. That's why they were saying it could be as much as $800 million or something like that, because they can override it. So actually, it kind of protects both of them in a sense. If he plays well up till when he's 31, both of them can make that decision then. But the contract itself is essentially a deferred contract because I don't think he's going to play well. I mean, if he plays well till he's 40, that's great. But it's almost like they just have a deferred contract because it's 15 years, So right. I don't think they necessarily expect to get that much out of him from ages 35 on.
So it's really a 5-year contract.
Right. Except all that money is guaranteed. So what Larry's saying is they can go over top of it, but they can't. The Mets can't get out of the contract in the 5th year.
No. The Mets, no, he can't get out of it if the Mets choose to keep him.
No, I understand that, but let's say, for example, he got injured in year 3. We get to that 5th year, the Mets can't get out of it.
No.
They're on the hook for the 760.
Right. That's the minimum that he will get.
Exactly.
Unless he leaves and takes less money, which I can't see him doing.
Look, I'm up against the clock, so let's try to wrap this up with closing comments. Mr. Indianapolis, Indiana, any Burnett, any closing comments from you, my friend?
I do. Just a shout out and a thoughtful prayer to Randy Moss.
Oh yeah,
the outstanding wide receiver, Hall of Famer. Who stepped away from his ESPN reporting commenting opportunities, take care of his health. Clearly, what he's dealing with is life-threatening. We don't know any much more than that. But when you have yellow eyes, that indicates something very badly is going on internally in your body, and it could be fatal. I wish him well. I hope he will be with us for a long time.
Good comments. Larry?
Yeah, second that.
Larry?
Yeah, I have a comment. Going back to Juan Soto's contract, I'm very happy for him and a lot of other players that would get that type of money. But I wish players would start thinking about how they compensate their agents for that. Instead of paying them 5%, they could have paid them a flat rate. Do you know that Scott Boras is making $38 million off of this contract.
Mm.
It's no reason in the world you just can't hire a lawyer and say, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars for an hourly rate and you get the job done. Because he could spend the same amount of time on somebody that's making $100,000 and get their 5% as he's paid on this one. And it's not because he's doing any more work. It's because of the work of the athlete or the value of the athlete. So at some point, especially in sports, I know the NBA has standardized contracts and I know the NFL does. I have not checked out Major League Baseball. But if the unions could, in their league, could also negotiate a standardized contract, all Juan Soto has to figure, go tell the Yankees, Mets, or whoever how much I make. I don't have to pay this guy $38 million. It's crazy. Wow. Ball players wake up and think about that. They could have he could have done the same job for $5 million, and that would have been great compensation for him.
Those were some great closing comments. I'll say something real quick for David, for David's behalf. Congratulations to Caitlin Clark, Time Magazine Athlete of the Year. Good job.
Amen.
Some of us were right about her from the beginning. So on that note, you guys were outstanding. Thank you, audience, for checking in with us tonight. We super appreciate that. Sorry for some of my technical difficulties. We'll see you next week. We're done. See you guys.
All righty.